Queen Street United Methodist Church in downtown Kinston, North Carolina. Welcome to our Bible study, and we welcome any of your comments. I should be able to see them as we're going along, so just join in the discussion with the rest of the class, and we'll be glad to hear from you. Today we're going to be studying Deuteronomy, the 14th chapter, and it's kind of an interesting chapter. It covers a number of customs that some of them seem ancient and some of them relate to things that are going on today. So let's take a look. In verse 1, you are children of the Lord your God. You must not lacerate yourselves or shave your forelocks for the dead, for you are a people holy to the Lord your God. It is you, the Lord, who has chosen out of all the peoples on the earth to be his people, his treasured possessions. Okay, now, evidently this was a custom that they could have picked up from neighboring societies that were not Jewish, and lacerating themselves or shaving your forelocks. Okay, I've done a lot of funerals, but I haven't seen anybody do that yet. What I have seen, though, is that every once in a while somebody will have a memorial tattooed on their arm or something. And if they're Jewish, they're not supposed to do that. But these are interesting customs. And I guess what they're trying to do is to make sure that the people differentiate themselves. Also, a lot of the pagan customs had communication with the dead, and they didn't want the Jewish societies to do that. They didn't want to emulate that. The Jewish custom that persists even to today is that when a person dies, they have to have their funeral by sundown, and so it's very, very quick. And another custom in Judaism is that a person has to be buried whole, so that one of the things that's going on in Israel, and has been for, I guess, the beginning of that society's wars, is that when they have somebody who is subject of a bomb explosion or something like that, they have to collect all the parts and bury all the parts together. They have special teams actually that go out and do that and make sure that the person is buried whole. I don't know the etiology of all that, but
what a terrible job.
Yes, it is a terrible job, but they do it, and they do it with honor. It's considered an honor to be a part of that practice. There is a respect in the Jewish culture from this, a recognition that a person once dead has moved on to some place else, that there's not supposed to be a communication with the person who's moved on. You should not be seeking that. And a lot of the cults, even today, sometimes people go to these fortune tellers and stuff, or seers, and they try to communicate with a dead relative. The Bible prohibits that sort of thing, no communication with the dead, which is kind of interesting. I don't know that I want some of those people to have the last say, but in any event, once you're dead, you are gone, and there is a demarcation between life and death, so that someone who handles the dead becomes ritually unclean, and they have to go through a ritual to restore their cleanliness before God. So, and the uncleanness is not something that has to do with washing dirt off. It's a contamination of the whole being.
Now, is that for Jewish people, or
Yeah.
that's just for Jewish?
Yes.
Okay, not for us.
No,
Okay,
no, that's their custom.
okay.
Okay, but you're going to see that not just with people, but also as we get into some of these dietary things, it also applies to animals. That depending on how that animal died, there's a differentiation on whether or not that animal can be consumed. So in Jewish culture, there is a sharp separation at death. Okay?
Now, is this God's law or is this just a Jewish custom?
It's in the Pentateuch. It's part of the law. The practices indicate this sharp differentiation between life and death. Okay? The Jews also understand that not only is the giving of life a divine prerogative, but the giving of death is also a divine prerogative. That nothing about life or death is in any way capricious in this culture. All right, this one gets interesting because we're getting into the dietary laws, clean and unclean foods. You shall not eat any abhorrent thing. Okay, now what is the operational definition of abhorrent? Okay, we'll get into that. These are the animals you may eat: the ox, the sheep, the goat, the deer, the gazelle, the roebuck, the wild goat, the ibex, the antelope, and the mountain sheep. Any animal that divides the hoof and has the hoof cleft in two and chews the cud among the animals you may eat. Yet of those that chew the cud or have the hoof cleft you shall not eat these: the camel, the hare, the rock badger, because they chew the cud but do not divide the hoof. They are unclean for you. And the pig, because it divides the hoof but does not chew the cud. It is unclean for you. You shall not eat their meat. You shall not touch their carcasses. All right. So much for a good barbecue in North Carolina.
Country ham?
Yeah, country ham.
Yeah,
My goodness.
good old bacon.
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 Oh. Think of the temptations.
Turkey bacon is an acquired taste.
Yeah. Well, what you're seeing, not just with these animals, but with other types of animals, is that one of the characteristics is that these are vegetarians that you can eat, but predators you can't. Okay? And one of the things that, I mean, there's a lot of discussion about whether pork was safe to eat at the time or anything, but you could say that about any of the animals. They all had, parasites and stuff. But a pig is omnivorous, so it's not limited to just eating vegetables and things. The pig will eat anything that's out there. It's like a scavenger, and so it's in the category of scavenger. You'll see that other scavengers are included in this, but the pig just had too broad a diet, so you're not supposed to eat those. Of all that live in water, you may eat these. Whatever has fins and scales, you may eat. And whatever does not have fins and scales, you shall not eat. It is unclean for you. So that would be like, can't eat a shark, or a ray,
Or catfish?
or a catfish.
Crabs?
Wow.
Crabs, oh yeah, we're going to get into that.
Crabs, shrimp, oysters?
That's
Now
right.
you're making me hungry.
Yeah. Okay, here's an anecdote. Okay. When my dad was a teenager, he worked in a fish market in Queens, and a lot of Jewish in that community. Okay. Now, one of the things my dad learned how to do extremely well was to make Manhattan clam chowder. And I don't know if any of you have eaten the Manhattan clam chowder, but it's really good. Okay. It's a tomato-based stew with clams. And if you're going to do it right, while you're preparing it, you put in a slab of fatback. Okay? Well, this is really delicious soup. And so a lot of the customers would come by and they'd want to get some Manhattan clam chowder. So they would always ask the proprietor, "There's no pork in this, is there?" And by that time, he had removed the slab of carpet. And he said, no, there's no pork in it. I said, oh, okay. So they go ahead and buy the clam chowder and enjoy it. The problem is it had clams in it. So clams are not kosher.
So what's the reasoning? Is this to teach discipline, or, I mean, why?
One of
Makes no
the,
sense.
yes, okay, there is the discipline that keeps your culture distinct. Okay? These sea creatures that don't have fins and scales, by and large, are bottom feeders and scavengers. You know, clams are filters, mussels are filters, and they live off the debris. And so they just, you know, I don't know if they really understood the anatomy of clams and stuff, but anything that was kind of on the bottom, and I know when I was a kid, we'd, you know, collect mussels every once in a while. They'd be on the post for piers and things, and they really look pretty gross down there. You know, squiggly things. You don't want to eat squiggly things, but that was their prohibition.
This is the USDA for the Jews.
This is the USDA for the Jews. Okay, I would call it the IDA for the Jews.
So are these laws,
Yes.
all of these dietary things, are they God speaking to someone?
To Moses. Yeah, God dictated this to Moses. And one of the things that I find really interesting is that these same dietary restrictions were adopted by the Muslim faith, so that they also, they call it halal, and it's kosher. It was kind of interesting because there was a Muslim family in our area that wanted to have a goat for a holiday, and they didn't have a local butcher who could prepare the goat properly. And I think there was a Jewish man in the community that offered to do it, and he could, you know, the preparation is exactly the same between the two religions. The thing that's really interesting is how closely tied those two faiths really are. They have so much more in common, in many respects more in common than they have with Christianity. And yet there's such great animosity between them today that it's really horrible. I'm hoping that as they go through this latest iteration of conflict, that they can begin to settle down with each other once peace is achieved, and start looking at each other, not be fed all the propaganda, anti-Semitism and things like that have typically come from the mosques and other purveyors of Islam. I think they have skewed some of the more noble aspects of Islam terribly because of these prejudices, and I think it's put them in a very bad spot in terms of, you know, generally speaking. Okay. Non-Muslims looking at their religion are not seeing some of the better qualities of Islam, because some of the more negative qualities of Islam are always at the fore, because of I can't call them zealots, but because of ideologues within that community. And it's a shame. It's a shame. Now, I'm not saying that we have not seen the same thing in Christianity, but Christianity is moving rapidly away from those attitudes.
Well, you know, Dennis, when you have all, to me, it almost seems like it's a cult. The Jewish people are a cult.
Well, so is Christianity.
Okay. Well, yeah, okay. We're just all cults.
Yes, we are at some level. Okay. Now, one of the things that is characteristic of a cult is that you don't have anything to do with anybody who's not in the cult. in a cult, they try to separate you from family, and you know, there are political cults, and they've been trying to separate our family this last Thanksgiving, trying to divide us, get us away from people who don't vote like us or think like us. You know, once you start getting into that mindset, whether it's in politics or religion, you're talking about a cult. And some of these laws, especially some of these dietary laws, make those distinctions so that you don't have anything to do really with people outside of your faith.
But that's the opposite of what Christianity is to me.
It's supposed to be, but Christianity has been like that, and I know that there are people who are divided within Christianity, that they won't have anything to do with others. Just take for instance the animosity that exists between the Roman Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox faiths that have led to genocide. You know, look at the Protestant Reformation and the carnage that has resulted from the animosity between Catholics and Protestants down through the years. You know, we've practiced this also. It is part of our history, and hopefully it's a part of our history that we have learned from, that we just don't do that. Okay, that's not part of what Christ taught us to do. We need to look at areas where Christians of various denominations are able to work together on beneficial projects to the glory of God, not to the glory of their respective religion. You know, once you can get past your respective religion and do things for the sake of the glory of God, you'd be amazed how well we get along. You know, I mean, look at all the massive support that has been going to Samaritan's Purse from non-Baptists, you know, and that's to the glory of God. That's, you know, you don't see Franklin Graham going out there and saying, now you can all become Baptists because you've supported us. Or, you know, look at the bell ringers for the Salvation Army that are out there. You know, you start doing things for the glory of God, and don't worry about those division stuff. And you can actually give good expression to your faith by supporting some other effort that's godly. Who knew? You know. But anyway, can't eat clams. You may eat clean birds, but these are the ones you shall not eat: the eagle, the vulture, the osprey, the buzzard, the kite of any kind, every raven of any kind, the ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, the hawk of any kind, the little owl, and the great owl, the water hen, which I don't know what that is, and the desert owl, the carrion vulture, and the cormorant. Well, cormorants don't taste good anyway.
What is it?
Oh, it's a black diving water bird.
Okay.
Yep. And we have a lot of them around here.
Seems like the vulture would fall in the same category as a bottom feeder.
Yes, it does, but you'll notice that all of these, whether eating carrion or fresh, are all meat eaters. So you don't want birds of prey. You're not allowed to eat birds of prey. The stork, the heron of any kind, the hoopoe, and the bat. I have not looked up the hoopoe. I guess it has to do with how it sounds. And all the winged insects are unclean for you. They shall not be eaten. You may eat any clean winged creature. Okay. What was the diet of John the Baptist?
Locust and honey.
Locust and honey.
Yes. Locusts are exempt. You can eat locusts. And you might as well, because they've eaten everything else.
Yeah, that's true. Chocolate covered ants, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, no, you're not allowed to eat chocolate-covered ants.
Oh, darn.
No, can't do that. You shall not eat anything that dies of itself. You may give it to aliens residing in your towns for them to eat, or you may sell it to a foreigner. Or, for some people, you can just park it in Central Park.
Yeah.
Okay, for you are a people holy to the Lord your God. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. All right, what is that all about?
What?
You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. And if you are in a kosher household, you will have separate plates altogether for dairy and for meat. You don't want any cross-contamination at all. They're very strict about that. And it comes from this, and the idea is that there is a reverence for motherhood and for life that this practice seems to violate. And so they don't want people to denigrate the mother-child relationship even in animals. So that's
But for example, like where James used to work at the, they made cooking oil.
right.
And they had a rabbi that would come and bless or do whatever. He did whatever, to make it kosher.
Right.
And it was cost him, I forgot, $10,000, I don't know, $1 million, I don't know. It's like a racket. They come in there and it's, pronounce it kosher.
Yes.
And they don't do anything different than they had ever done.
Right.
But they had.
Like Mount Olive pickles.
But a rabbi has to, the rabbi has to oversee how it's prepared. It's just like there is a kosher way of killing an animal. And so a rabbi would go into like a meat processing plant and look at how
This is soybeans.
well, soybeans, anything. Another anecdote here. I went with my brother-in-law to a Giants game, and he had great seats up on the mezzanine where all the restaurants are. And so I was looking around for a restaurant that I was going to get lunch from, and I found a kosher counter. And I thought, wow, I can get a knish there, which I did, and it was a lousy knish. But anyway, I wanted to get a knish, and they were giving away meatball subs, and that was good, and I got a water with it, and went back to my seat. At halftime, I decided I wanted to get another water, so I went up to the kosher counter, and I said, I want a kosher water. And they looked at me funny, and I said, there's a kosher counter, right? They said, yes. Well, I want a kosher water. And so they looked at each other, and they said, okay. So they went in the back, and they brought me out a bottle of DeSanti. And they said, now you should really enjoy this because this water has been specially blessed. I said, I didn't know I could get holy water from a kosher counter.
But there's this little symbol, on
Yes.
the bottle, that says it's kosher.
Yeah, that's right.
James, tell them what that symbol is on the bottles that say
Come back up.
Get in, James.
the kosher, that little symbol.
There's a star, and there's also
Right.
Circle U, which is the Orthodox Union out of New York City, and there's a Circle K too. And both
I get kosher gas.
they're
Circle
both
K.
kosher. There's two different segments, or two separate separates of the Jewish communion up there.
Right.
And I don't know the difference between all of them. I know some of them have the long curly hair kind
Yes.
of thing and stuff, and some of them just wear the little thing on their head. But I had a rabbi from Raleigh, Rabbi Herman, came to our plant every year to inspect it for the kosher improvements.
Right.
Certain things we had to do to be able to put that symbol on there.
Right.
The only way to sell our product into their businesses, we had to have it on. So all our boxes that we put oil in came with the Circle U.
Yep.
All right.
What the rabbi charge you?
He came in, walked around with me, showed him a few documents he wanted to see, and walked away with $6,000. So
That's right.
I guess I'm in the wrong business.
How many of this place
Well, Susan's a Hebrew name when I go in there.
if you want to sell in certain areas, you have to have it.
That's
A lot of
right.
the other businesses we sold to, particularly your distributors like US Foods and Cisco and them, they wanted it too because they sold into those areas too. So you had to have it to be able to get the businesses.
Wow.
That's right.
Money, money, money.
Money, 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 money.
Next word over.
Money talks.
And Dennis, you said you went to the kosher stand and you got a meatball sub, or what was in the meatballs?
It was a regular meatball sub.
Beef.
Which, the meatballs are made from cow
They could
or
be made.
They were beef.
they were beef?
Yeah, they're beef.
Well, it says you chew the cud or have hooves. That would
Right.
be a cow.
Split hooves.
Cows have split hooves, don't they?
Right, and they chew the cud, so they're kosher.
So that would be, I thought that says you don't eat that.
No, you can have something that splits the hoof but doesn't chew the cud like a pig. That's not kosher.
Okay.
Okay, it's gotta do both.
Okay.
It's got to do both.
It's gotta be both.
Get straight, man, get straight.
Well, you don't, Van, you don't want to mess up, you know? Don't want to be contaminated.
It's a lot of rules.
A lot of rules. Now, this is something that I think is instructive for us, that these dietary distinctions are not just there, and you can argue that this is healthier eating, and it really was, okay? I mean, you know, you can get some bad shrimp, and that'll ruin your day. But these dietary rules are not simply for healthier eating, even though ultimately there is some benefit from being careful about what you eat. The dietary restrictions are there so that you don't sit down with a non-Jew in a non-Jewish house. Now, there is no problem for a Gentile to come into a Jewish house. Now, back then, in Jesus' day, it just being in the presence of a Gentile would contaminate you because the Pharisees took this stuff way past original intent. But I know that I've sat down in Jewish homes and had meals and stuff. Whether or not a Jew would come to my house, I would have to comply more with kosher than I'd have to adapt my menu in order to have a Jew into my house. But even then, you could not easily accommodate just the pots and pans and dishes that go along with all of that. Okay? So the idea was to keep a division between a Jewish household and a Gentile household. Now, in the New Testament, you have this thing in the book of Acts, the story in the book of Acts of Peter going to Cornelius's house, and before he went there, he had a dream where God lowered a sheet full of unclean food and told Peter to rise, kill, and eat. And Peter said, no, I would never do such a thing. And it came 3 times, and finally God said, that which I call clean, don't you call unclean. Now, where does that come from? How come God could violate that law? Go all the way back to the creation narrative. God created all of these things, all of these different creatures, and what did he call them?
Good.
Good.
So how could something be unclean?
Well, that's the
He created
question.
everything.
That's the question, and there's the disconnect between these differentiations. And remember, I like to go back to original intent, okay? And what was the original intent? The original intent was that these things were good in God's eyes. And we, because we want cultural different distinctions, and maybe because of bad experiences with a clam, have put in these rules, but bad experiences with roadkill, So, we learn things as we go along, but at the same time, to call something completely unclean when God has declared that it's good to begin with is it's a conflict.
But I thought you said God said this.
God evidently talks out of both sides of his mouth.
If you really wanted to get into the weeds with this, I mean, you have people today, like Sandra and myself, who are allergic to shellfish.
Right.
Well, back then, you didn't know.
You didn't know.
And you could eat a plate of shrimp and die.
And die.
And then you have vultures, which eat
Yeah.
dead animals. So
Right.
kind of clean. I mean, you can rationalize all this stuff. But
It's easy to
say, well, you don't follow God because you ate a pig, you ate pork loin, pork chops.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of getting where you're really splitting hairs.
Yes, and that was the issue that Jesus had with the Pharisees, was that they're more interested in splitting hairs than they were on doing what was moral and good, essentially, you know? Is it really, I mean, if God created humanity in his own image, then how do you devalue the life of another human
Yeah,
just because they don't believe the way you do?
or they do things that you don't think are right.
Right. What you're saying is, and what the Old Testament says quite distinctly, is that God loves these people and doesn't love those people. And I'm wondering, if God doesn't love those people, why did he make them in the first place?
There you
Are
go.
you talking like, I'm confused, which, that's normal nowadays. But are you saying like a serial killer?
Yeah,
Somebody that's really evil,
yeah.
you wonder why God created them? Is that?
No, I don't wonder why God
Does-
created them, okay?
Does God love them just as much as he loves Franklin Graham, say?
Christ died for us while we were yet sinners,
Yeah,
all right? So, are there people who are irredeemable? I believe so,
okay.
okay? But it's not because God planned not to redeem them. It's because of choices that they have made.
But, see, this is one thing I've had problems with my whole walk through Christianity, that somebody like that, somebody so evil and mean that does stuff like that, they could get in heaven just as easily as I could.
Have you read The Buzz?
All they gotta do is repent of their sins
Yeah,
and they're there.
yeah, isn't that awful?
Yeah,
That sounds really unfair.
it does.
I hope I get the same level of grace.
I hope I do too.
Well, that's the plan.
But it just doesn't sound, yeah,
God looks at people like that as people who are having a difficult birth into heaven. To die is to be born to another life. And there are some births that are complicated and don't succeed. But if we had somebody who had complications in birthing and they had a successful birth, we would celebrate. And that's God's attitude. Oh, after all that, he finally came through.
This is a little something that I had seen that Max Lucado wrote. It makes me smile to think there's a grinning thief walking the golden gates of heaven who knows more about grace than 1,000 theologians.
Yeah. Take a look at the prodigal son,
yeah.
okay? I mean, if you're going to be Christian, that's, you know, everybody has the potential of being redeemed. Isn't that awful? I know some people I hope never were, but nonetheless. Okay. Well, thanks for being with us. We're going to pick it up at verse 23 next time. And this has to do with the tithes and the sanctuary, which I think you're going to find interesting. But let's shut it down for now. But God bless you. Glad to have you with us. And be sure and send in comments. You can do it at my email address at revlev@nccumc.org. And God bless you for being with us.